Ya lo hace. Pierna derecha, directo al arco. ¡Golazo! ¡Golazo!
The world of football with a soccer perspective. This is Soccer Today with Duane, Rollins and Kevin Laramee. Live on the Sports Podcasting Network.
And good day, good night. Welcome to Soccer Today for November 27th, 2017. Duane, it's a sad weekend just because it's official now. 2 an ASL franchise at least, if not the whole league. We'll talk about this down the road, but now for sure, officially, it's written, it's said, FC Edmonton and the San Francisco Deltas are no more.
Yeah, obviously I had an interview with Steven Sandor that unfortunately had a bit of sound issues, and I know what happened. I'm going to put my hand up there and owe that one. But if you can listen to it anyway, you can get some content out of it, which he covered a lot of this on the weekend. But, maybe I'll talk a little bit about that interview and Steven's perspective on that. But before we do that, it is sad, especially the Deltas. Obviously, there's a lot of Canadian content in both of them. We jokingly called the Deltas Team Canada because of the amount of Canadian content there was in Mark DeSantos, obviously. But FC Edmonton, we didn't have to joke about it. There was a Canadian team, and we don't have many of them. And now, without the Canadian Premier League starting yet, and people increasingly losing faith in the project, which is a whole other topic that I'll probably get to in a moment as well. It's just another one gone, and it's discouraging because it seemed like everything was going in the right direction. We were all excited, and then it's not no fault of their own because of the market anyway. And I hate to blame fans, but that's sort of where Sandor and Tom Faith went with it. Not blaming fans, but blaming the lack of fans. It's sad because you want this to thrive, you want the sport to continue, and every time you think you might be moving forward a little bit, something roars up and gives you a slap back down to earth. And this is another case when it comes to the scene here in Canada. And with the Deltas, it sort of speaks to the lack of stability below Major League Soccer. Major League Soccer is thriving. Let's make no mistake about that. And there are people out there that don't like aspects of that league, as we well know. And there are aspects of that league that I think that need to evolve. And I've been candid about that. But beyond that level, and this is maybe the biggest issue that happens here and where a lot of that discontent comes from, there is a lot of uncertainty, and we need the level below Major League Soccer to do better, and that is hard to see how that happens in the near future.
What worries me a bit is FC Edmonton. When we're looking at the situation, it's a folding of the actual organization now. Who knows down the road what it is? Tom Fath hasn't necessarily been close to the idea of another possibility of a team eventually, but he mentioned that Canadian Premier League is something that it's needed in Canadian soccer. The viability in Edmonton now needs to be proven again before maybe investments are made. But what's sad for me is that franchise had results, it had gains, it saw moments where it got their stadium full, it got fans excited for the game, it got potential, and that potential was shown on many occasions and on the pitch too. A good call away from Drew Fisher,
Yeah.
and Edmonton would have maybe won the Canadian Championship, maybe would have won to the final. It's so close sometimes, and this franchise, that's how I would resume it. It got close to be viable and sustainable.
Yeah, on the pitch, look, I don't think they ever quite reached the heights that they would have liked on the pitch, but they did have some high moments, and they did have a great stretch over the last 18 months or so. Not quite the last 18 months or so, but 18-month stretch that unfortunately didn't quite ebb in the correct way to give them the most success on the field. They sort of split it between seasons, so they weren't able to have as many points on the board as they would have liked in any one season. So that said, I mean, it's their knees have been cut off right now, and they did a lot of good work, especially in the sense that among the Canadian teams, they were arguably the most Canadian of all, in the sense that they gave a lot of local and Canadian players the opportunity to play. And that is really the saddest thing of all right now for me when we're talking about this. The Deltas, another issue. They were only 1 year in the market. There is a MLS team quite close for those fans. They have something to fall back upon. But But if you're FC Edmonton, you're a fan of FC Edmonton, you're really, this is just dark days because you've gone from having a team to literally nothing other than going out and supporting their academy kids, which is a noble thing to do. But in reality, it's not the same. You can't go to the pub and get a little numb to the day and go out and chant.
You can try, but you'll be looked upon and somebody will say, hey, dude, like, calm down here a little.
Yeah, exactly. It's a different experience. And I'm sure that there will be, of the Eddie supporters groups, that there will be a solid effort to sort of to keep together. They'll probably, I'm not speaking for them, I'm speculating here, but I suspect that they'll probably try and go out and support FC Edmonton, academy kids when they can. But again, it won't be the same thing. They'll probably have meetups in the pubs and all that sort of jazz to keep the momentum going for the Canadian Premier League, and that is the next step. People hope, and that's the key here. And when you talk to Sandor, and the takeaway from that and his articles on the 11.ca is that there's no guarantee that that's even what their goal is. And I think that that's something a lot of people are having trouble believing. They want to believe that that's just, no, that's just them talking. But, I talked to Steven both on and off the record, and my takeaway from it was that, he has a good understanding of what FC Edmonton and Tom Faith believe and want, and that they aren't convinced yet that the market can sustain professional soccer. And if they're not convinced, they might not jump in, and that might require another ownership group to step up if Edmonton is going to be part of a Canadian Premier League in 2019 for a start. So there's no guarantee there, and there's just uncertainty in Edmonton, and we didn't think there was, and we thought for sure when we were checking off boxes on Canadian Premier League, we were like, okay, we've got Hamilton and we've got Winnipeg committed. Obviously, Ottawa and Edmonton come around. So really we just, and we've heard a lot of strong things about Halifax. So really we just need one more market to hit that magic 6, and then we'll be ready to go. Well, now suddenly, maybe we need 2 more markets before we're going to hit the magic 6. And then suddenly you're thinking, maybe 2019 is not real. And then 2020. And then you're starting to then it's starting to sound like, an internet dream fest rather than anything real. Right. And people start to go, well, this isn't even true. So I just want USL teams. And I saw that there were people out there on Twitter going, screw this Canadian Premier League stuff. I'm done with it. Obviously, CSA doesn't know what they're doing. They're just making this up. And this kind of stuff, this like almost conspiracy theory stuff, is starting to go out there. And people are demanding that we allow more USL teams in the country. And that's terrifying.
I think it's the answer. Like, the last 2 years, that now a single year we lose a Canadian USL team. We're back down to 1. Like, no, actually 2. TFC 2 and Ottawa. So we're down to 2. Yeah. But just to finish with Edmonton, looking at it now with a little bit of hindsight, was it a success or failure? Yes. Stop operation. Does it actually mean it's a failure? Or should we look at Edmonton's time in North American soccer a little bit more fondly?
I think we should look at it fondly. It was a noble project that a lot of people thought was crazy when they launched it back in 2009, ages ago now, man. I was still doing, it's called football when FC Edmonton started. So that's how long ago it was. In fact, I wasn't still done. I was in the middle of it. So that was, a different era in many ways from my perspective, right? Like, you think back to that time in Canadian football, it's like pre-Whitecaps and Impact in MLS. Like, this was a great idea. It was like getting the game out into markets that we didn't necessarily think that it would sort of thrive in. I mean, back in the last part of the aughts, I guess is what we've decided we're calling the first decade of the century, a lot of people felt that soccer could only possibly work in the biggest metropolitan areas, in the 3 big metros. But, at times Edmonton proved them wrong. At times Ottawa is proving them wrong. Consistency has been an issue here. But without, I think, those at times, and a lot of stuff happening on the MLS side, let's not kid ourselves, but those people, they played a role in helping us get to the point that people started to believe that maybe we could get into a Winnipeg, we could get into a Halifax, we could get into, I don't know, even smaller centers than that. And that's, I think they deserve some credit for that. But that said, ultimately, partly through their own doing, but also I think a lot to do with the NASL and sort of the Division 2, Division 3 stuff out there, this day has come. And, I asked Steven in the interview whether he felt that that they would have continued had the D2 stuff not happened. He was uncertain. I think that they would have been far more likely, I think is the way to put it. But Tom Faith, when I made the announcement, was clear to say that he felt he was a little bitter about it, basically, when you read between the lines, in the sense that he put all of his money in there and he could never get the community to completely buy in. And partly that's to do with the idea that it is a lower level. But, if there's another topic we're going to talk about later today, if you're frustrated by the lack of soccer coverage or the lack of soccer in your community, you have a very concrete way to support this, and it's to support it with your wallet and your feet. You need to get if you want this, it's I'm not trying to blame fans for this.
Yeah. You're not like trying to sucker shame people. You're just trying to make people realize that if you like that team, if you like that brand, if you like that presence in your city, buy the jersey. Maybe buy a season ticket and bring a friend. To take now famous words from the San Francisco Deltas, bring a friend.
Yeah, and it's true. I mean, it sounds like we're in this era now where everyone, there's, how do I put this without sounding like an old man yelling at the sun? I don't know. Clouds. I guess you don't yell at the sun, you yell at the clouds, don't you?
Well, it depends. It's like if you're not wearing a hat, sun can be dangerous, and you don't want to get the burn,
Starting about 20 years ago, we started to get stuff for free that we always had to pay for. And now we're paying the cost of that. A lot of things are disappearing that society needs. Society doesn't need a soccer team, but society wants soccer teams, sports teams, local sports teams, and they're disappearing because we're used to, getting stuff for free on the internet and staying home and getting more insular and arguing on Twitter rather than getting out in the community and supporting stuff that we love, that we used to love anyway. And this is all part of a societal shift. And I think it's kind of, I'm getting a little too deep here for a podcast form, but I think it's kind of sad. So if you want to get out and you want to support local soccer is an easy sort of hashtag out there, right? But it's a little more difficult to do it on the day in, day out. And it can become, it can be overwhelming if you're one of the guys pushing and pushing and pushing. So if you're listening out there and you're not one of the guys pushing and pushing and pushing in your community, and you know this guy, everyone has a guy in their town that is always at the pub and is always the one selling the scarves and making the T-shirts and all that sort of stuff. In the Voyageurs, it would be Jamie McLeod, right?
Help him, support them, help them. Literally, go help them. Like, hey, dude, anything I can do for you?
Exactly, and that's how you help the local game thrive in your community, is to get involved. And to get involved, it starts by going to the game, sure, but beyond that, you can do stuff to get out there and support that in more concrete ways. In financial, it's not always financial, but you can help the finances grow in that sort of way by doing a little bit more, by taking an extra step. And if you're listening to a show like ours, then you're probably inclined to want the game to thrive at the local level. So that's kind of my message here. All right, that's my pom-poms are off now, and maybe we'll continue on with after a short break, Kevin.
Exactly.
You are listening to Soccer Today. Follow us on Twitter at Soccer Today SPN and like our Facebook page, facebook.com/Sports Podcasting Network. You can find the podcast version of all the shows we do on iTunes, Apple Podcast, Google Play Store, TuneIn Radio, iHeartRadio, and anywhere you get your podcast.
And we're back on Soccer Today. Duane Rollins with myself, Kevin Laramee. Duane, USL. We mentioned the folding of teams in the NASL with Edmonton and San Francisco. Well, Vancouver Whitecaps FC2 are no more as well. And now the affiliate of the Vancouver Whitecaps will be Fresno Football Club. Frank Yallop, former MLS coach, Canadian product, former Canadian men's national team player back a few years ago. Sorry, Frank, I don't mean to age you, but Frank Yallop's team will now be the affiliate of Vancouver Whitecaps 2, which led me to a reflection. And we actually talked about this, 2-3 years ago. We said, Duane, now it's early. It's been a year or two in. It's quite early to talk about this. Now it's 4 years in. The USL-MLS 2 teams experiment. 4 years in, and now we're seeing them disappear one by one.
Or go more to the affiliate model. It has to do with the D2, D3 requirements in the stadium as much as anything else. First off, I really have very little time for the Whitecaps when it comes to decisions like this. I've been critical of the Impact with their decision to get rid of FC Montreal. I'm going to be as critical with the Whitecaps, maybe more so. They like to talk about their great academy and how much that is such that how that counteracts the fact that they won't spend big on DPs. Well, this is a kind of a slap in the face of anyone who's bought into that philosophy for them. So I know I'm the Whitecaps hater here, but I don't think even if you're a Whitecaps fan listening to this, you can be overly supportive of the idea of them cutting anything on the academy side when they give you the line all the time about how that is what makes them special and how that is what makes them stand out and how that is going to make them, compete against the big clubs out there. Well, suddenly now you're going to throw 3 or 4 players to another team that has a different agenda, and it's going to be difficult for them. But look, in terms to get back to your original question, the one thing that we're seeing, particularly here in Canada, is the struggles of how it is to balance this need to play your young players and also the reality of the fact that means you're going to suck in USL. TFC2 is hard to watch sometimes. I'll be the first to admit it.
Yeah, it's true.
Yeah, and it doesn't make for a fun trip up to Vaughan. I'll be very curious to see, and thankfully they are leaving Vaughan, and that is nothing against the good people of Vaughan. And when they first went up there, I thought it was a decent idea. I increasingly am against that, and they're coming downtown for a year, and I hope that it works, and I think that it will at least make the atmosphere in the stands a little bit more viable. I suspect that you'll see Inebriati, for instance, be consistent, presences in the stands. So you'll have a supporter section there that is loud and vibrant. That will, I think, make it a little more fun for people to go out on a Friday night, and it's a lot easier when you can catch a streetcar in half hour versus 6 buses and 12 trolleys and a short helicopter ride or something to get up to Vaughan. I'm exaggerating a little bit, but
don't you need your passport? I thought you need your passport to get there.
Well, just to reiterate one last time, I don't ever have to talk about this again, the geography of Toronto. I live about 12 kilometers due south of where that stadium would be. It would take me 2 hours to get there by transit. Figure that out. We can't, but that's how long it takes.
It's not necessarily quicker by car anyways, because you're going to be stuck in traffic all the way there.
Yeah, it's ridiculous, but it's going down to essentially, to BMO Field and to Lamport Stadium, which is right there. It's just across the block, and part of that is them trying to block the Canadian Premier League from getting into Lamport, which is really TFC's greatest fear, is to have another team in Liberty Village, which is right where the BMO Field is anyway. It's going to be interesting to see, and I think it's going to help. I don't know, but it's not going to help on the field, and because they still have this problem where you're playing kids that don't have a lot of experience, and the mandate is different than what it is at the different level. I think that really what we're seeing here, and what I'm looking forward to when it comes to TFC. This is going to sound ridiculous on some level, but I can't wait for them to get demoted to the D3 level, because I think they'll be more competitive and it will be better for them at that level.
Yeah, they'll be in the when USL will basically have 2 divisions, which they actually do, right? Starting next year or 2 years from now, next year USL 2 basically. yeah,
where's the D3? I guess. Yeah,
USL D3 I think is the branding. Yeah.
Yeah, and that's going to be better for them, because they'll still be playing professional, and they'll still be playing against men, and they'll still be able to get out there, but they'll be winning more games. And I've had lots of conversations with managers about this. And as much as we on the sort of outside the technical side of things of the game, that believe in long-term development and things like that, will say, oh, winning doesn't matter, scoreboard doesn't matter. They'll say, well, yes and no. It shouldn't be your entire focus. You should be focusing on process and development, yeah, but at the same time, if you're just losing, you're creating a culture of losing, and that's difficult to overcome, and that's a detriment to development too. So when they're over their heads to the level that they are, and they really are, I mean, it's men against boys in the literal sense, and it's not even really fair, and it's not fair to the D2 teams too to have to market, like if you're FC Cincinnati, for instance, and you're trying to present yourself up at the level that they are, and then you have Toronto C2 coming in. I mean, that's difficult for you to sell in your market, and it just doesn't fit that way. So having this divide, so you can have clubs that have philosophies like TFC2 out there come into this D3 level is going to, I think, make this partnership work fairly well. But to answer, I'll let you jump in after this real quick, but I do think that there is enough good about the partnership that it should continue. And I hope that more MLS teams come back into the fold or come into the fold to this complete when it gets to the D3, to come in and join D3 at that level, because that's the appropriate level for these reserve squads, I think, is to be playing at the third division against smaller communities that want to have professional teams. And I think a smaller community would be excited to see an MLS reserve team come in, as opposed to these sort of mid-level teams that sort of look at it as a slap in their face.
Yeah, basically they have to maybe adhere a bit more to the concept of Real Madrid B, right? Or other teams like Barcelona B or Segundo, or whatever the name is. They're truly dedicate them as a reserve team. Like, no ifs and buts about it. Not a. That's what it is. That's what it is, and create a place for that to exist and to be maybe an upgrade on the old reserve league of MLS, right? Because that's what's missing, I think, right now, is maybe a reserve league type of place where it's not hiding from what it is. It's not trying to be something it's not, but it is what it is, and you have to find a way to make it exist and viable, and maybe having a D3 and maybe, I don't know, subsidized by the teams that do have a reserve team in there, and you find ways to make it viable and not necessarily needing to have a lot of fans in the stands to make it a true success, and you have defining success as in players' products or something, player produce, and stars. You can say, oh, look at this brand new star for the U.S. men's national team, Canadian men's national team. Well, they got their shot in the D3. They got their shot in USL D3 in the quote-unquote reserve league, and look at them now. That's basically what you're striving for.
Yeah, no, precise. And look, I think that when not to belabor TFC2, but it's just in my backyard. It's an obvious comparison.
Yeah, it's the example that you're more aware of, since you're just drawing conclusion with this one, and it's fair.
Yeah, I think that when they move to Lamport, that they can probably average around 2,500 fans a game. I think that that's a realistic goal for them next year. And of those 2,500, I think that maybe 300 to 400 of them will be engaged fans, will be fans that will be in a supporter section, will be singing, and will be providing some atmosphere. And I know on a personal level that I will probably, like right now when it was in Vaughan, I was getting to 2 or 3 games a year. That was just the reality of it. I told you the logistical issues of it, so it was difficult for me. But now that it's at Lamport next year, if there's no conflicts with TFC proper or League One Ontario, for that matter, I will go. I will go instinctively, always. And I know that there's a lot of my friends, and I run in a very hardcore TFC crowd, as you know. A lot of them will do it as well. Not all of them, but a good percentage of them. And it will be a good, informed, very informed soccer crowd that show up to these games, and they will understand that they're looking for prospects, and they will be accepting of the fact that there will be struggles out there. That said, that 1,100 or 2,500 or so fans that do exist that go to these games is exactly sustainable for the type of markets that I have in mind. And it's sort of, I'm thinking a CHL model, a junior hockey model, in the sense that if you can get that 2,500, 3,000 consistently out there, you have a viable product, and you have a product that matters to people that care about the game, and it will be exciting, and it will be worthwhile on its own accord too, not just on the development front. Like when TFC2 is competitive with the league they're in, you will start to get more excitement around them, because you'll be like, okay, well, maybe we can get the playoffs, or maybe we can actually compete for a championship here. And that, I think, is something that will excite people a lot more. Yeah. Anyway, any thoughts on that, Kevin?
No, I agree, and we'll see. It is,
and hopefully, hopefully FC Montreal can look at a viable market like that and jump back in, and that's kind of what I want to see. I don't know whether that's just one example. I don't know whether that's what Joey's thinking on that front, but if it's cheaper,
no, but that's what I guess Miguel wants, because they already talked in, not necessarily in the proper term that we use here. He didn't mention FC Montreal or whatever, but he loves to work with academy. He loves to work with development product. He loves to having a place for them to play. So we'll see what the future holds. But you don't go by a coach, manager of this stature, forks out millions of dollars over a few years to get him, and you're not going to waste that, right?
D3, it's going to be regional.
Exactly, and you might be able to get, like with a $200,000, $300,000, $400,000 budget, maybe you get the whole team in or something, right? It's not going to be in like the 3 or 5 like a USL team is.
It'll be. I can almost guarantee you that the model will be 4 regions. That you'll have a Northeast region, and Montreal and Toronto could be in that. They'd be playing probably as far south as maybe DC. Maybe DC might even be in the Southeast, but
like the bus trip, like the easy 6 to 8 hours bus trip max. You go play against Philly or like the region of Philly, like there's a lot of places, markets you can do. From northeast for majority of people, but for us is a southeast of our neck of the woods, Toronto, Montreal, down, and then you go down up until, like you mentioned, the south of the state of New York.
Yeah, I think DC, probably DC North, and
DC is manageable.
Yeah, and look, there'll be communities in there that we're not familiar with yet that will emerge that will probably be in like that 100,000 range, 100,000, 200,000 people that will have teams and will want to step up from the D4 right now. That'll probably be something we'll see, and there'll be probably four regions, as I said. There'll be 4 leagues. They'll probably play each other completely within that league, and then there'll be a champion in the Final 4. That's pretty much a pretty obvious setup that they'll go with.
And you do no playoffs in conference. The winner of the season gets to go to the Final 4, D3 or USL Reserve, whatever. Then you have a nice little round robin, and then you have like a little important game, and you call it, guess what? The D3 Bowl.
Or something like that, yeah. And I mean, look, there's been some talk of a semi-open or pyramid with promotion and relegation there, and that'd be fine. I'd be okay with that. But I think that said, I don't think that it's necessarily something that TFC2 or FC Montreal or the Red Bulls, well, Red Bulls too do well.
Yeah, all do well on the field. They don't do well in the stands.
Yeah, well,
it's fine. Yeah, exactly. It depends what you're there for.
What you want. I mean, TFC wants to play 19-year-olds. So they don't probably, even if they were to get promoted, they'd probably decline it. So that's
like, here you go, you're promoted. No, we're good. We're good.
Which is fine too. You know what? And if you look, we have this idea that every club aspires for promotion. Some clubs are happy with the level they're at.
Yep.
And you see that. You see that with
Sutton United.
Yeah, or you see that clubs in Spain too. Like, I mean, the B teams can't go to the La Liga, right? Like, they're not allowed. And that's okay because they understand that where they're needed is right where they are. So there you go.
No, I have to agree. All right, let's take a quick break and finish the show with some bits and bites. Or just us talking, because
you can find it.
We're back. It happens sometimes where one song won't want to play and all the other songs plays at once. And now it's the bits and bites, Duane.
All right, crunch, crunch, bits and bites. Every handful is different. We should get. Do you remember that commercial?
I do. Yeah, it's like a cartoon of an old man, like walking in front of his lawn. And there's like a fence.
Yeah, we're confusing our American listeners with this, but there's a famous Bits and Bites is a snack food. I don't think it's in the States. It's Canadian snack food. There's a commercial that's run since like I was a boy. So anyway,
well, it's like kind of like a party mix, but kind of like a little bit different, less fried, more baked type of party mix, you could say.
It's garlic baked mix. Yeah.
Let's just say it goes down really well with some beer.
Yeah, I really like Bits and Bites, actually, especially the good. They have it in like.
Okay, I need to eat, so stop it, please.
Okay. All right. Yeah. Okay. Anyhow, I wanted to start, Kevin. I want to have a little a friend of the show, Paul and Richard Farley. We're both from 442. We're I don't know, laid off, I guess is the way to put it. Contracts not renewed, what have you. Today, 442 basically axed its high-end MLS content, as far as we can tell. And this is on the heels of some non-soccer journalism news where like 20-plus papers in Ontario today were closed.
37 in Canada, Post Media and
Torstar.
Torstar, exactly. So all the 24 hours and a lot of places are shut down, and a lot of Metro as well, those free newspapers. Yeah, it's not a good day for journalism once again. We have one of those every few months now.
Yeah, and look, I, as a person who went to journalism school and envisioned a life of being a journalist and still work very hard to try and maintain a foothold in the world while still doing stuff like making soap at 3 a.m. to pay bills because the field is collapsing underneath my feet. I get very frustrated by this. And some people may say boo-hoo, blah, blah, blah. But look, let's just keep this soccer related. A lot of people love the work of Richard and Paul, right? And now they're sad on Twitter today. Oh, I'm so sad that I won't be able to read you anymore. And then meanwhile, I put a poll out today going, how much would you be willing to pay for a subscription for North American, high-end North American focused, like, athletic model out there? And right now, 60% of the people responding are saying that they would either pay nothing or less than $5 for it a month. You get what you pay for, people. And again, this is me lecturing you a little bit, but this is the problem with niche journalism right now, is that everyone wants it that's in that niche, but no one's willing to pay for it.
Hashtag blame Napster. Because that's where it started. That's where that behavior. Here, I'm raising my hand. I'm guilty too. We're all guilty here.
Yeah, I had thousands of now. Like I
we produce free content for F's sakes. So like raise our hand. It's like, I'm not saying we don't have something to do with all of this. We don't. We don't have the reach to be like. We're just one of those ripples in the big lake. We're just a very, very tiny stone, but there's ripples.
Yeah, I mean, look, we promote our Patreon here, and there's a little bit of money that comes in for this, and we're going to try very hard in the new year to get into an advertising model on this show, but it's a struggle every day, and I think that this is just, I wanted to get it out there that, look, you're going to get what you pay for, and if you aren't willing to support independent North American soccer news sources out there, then eventually they're going to disappear. And if you're okay with that, then
they disappear or they go behind a paywall now. It's one or the other.
And I believe on the writing side that's increasingly the answer. And it's, people may notice that I don't write on Canadian soccer news that much anymore. I maintain the site so that we pay for it so that it's there in case something breaks that I want to write something about. And I do a little bit of writing occasionally on the vocal minority for the same reason. It's more a vanity project on the vocal minority in case I want to put something out on TFC. But the reason I don't write isn't because I don't want to. It's because I don't feel I should. Not for free anymore. And that's my philosophy. That's where I'm coming from on that. I enjoy this, and I will continue to do this. We will continue to look for ways to monetize this. But something's got to give here, folks, because we need to eat. And we can't produce the content at the level that you guys want it at unless we're supported. And that's not me begging for money for you right now and for us, although if you want to, you know how to find it.
No, but we're just, it's that behavior, that mentality, which, like magazine world, right, doesn't exist anymore because people could get similar to the magazine on their phone with images and text and didn't have to pay for stuff. You did have to wait a month to get it, and by the time you get your magazine, the news outdated. But yeah, so that same thing is kind of happening to everything else. We see those sports. Sports is one of the first places that people cut in, like in newspapers, agencies, and like newsrooms. Like when you have a choice, do we close the whole newsroom or just close the sports section? We'll just one of the person who does news watches sports a bit and write big titles, and that's about it. Yeah, it's where it's going, unfortunately. But it's a transition period. Cream rises to the top. Cream rises to the top.
Final thought. I don't want to belabor this too much. We'll get back on soccer stuff. But, this is soccer related. But at any rate, when it comes to soccer news coverage, it's really just our enjoyment. We're losing our enjoyment. When you're talking about losing local newspapers, you're literally putting lives at risk. That may sound dramatic, but when you're not holding people in power accountable, stuff like, Flint, where the water stuff there, that's a journalism failure. And you may say, well, if it's a journalism failure, then why should we support journalism? Well, journalists require resources. It's
a failure because of a lack thereof. It's not a failure because it was too much or a wrong one. It's because it's a big example, but I think you're right. And I think what's municipal anymore? Not a whole lot. It's like local media. That's one thing, here being Canada and watching the States and having American TV channels of like Burlington and Plattsburgh. Yeah, it's not as big as it used to be. It's only news and a few shows. But there is some local presence still. And every single damn day, there is local news. And that's a model that I miss now in Canada because it's been cut and slashed a long time ago. But the local, there's no more local in Canada. You get 3 market. Don't you know that, Duane? If you live in the Maritimes, you don't exist. You just watch Montreal and Toronto news. If you're in Montreal, if you're in Montreal, you watch. If you're in Quebec as a province, you just basically you're Montreal because that's all you portrayed. If you're in Ontario, you're Toronto, and if you're the rest, well, you're Vancouver. If not, well, good luck finding local products.
Yeah, well, I lived in Maritimes for a while. You're right. It was mostly the national news, and there was ATV, which is out of Halifax. So, there was one Halifax news source, but hell, God help you if you were in Dieppe, right? No one's up there covering you. So
you live in Lunenburg, good luck finding the weather. Good. I hope you have the app on your phone, because otherwise you won't know.
Exactly. All right. Let's move on.
Yeah. Bits and bytes. The next handful.
Yeah, well, what was the next handful? I'm so distracted by
I
this.
remember, what was the next handful? No MDS watch. Let's MDS watch. Still no official words, and haven't heard anything new, and haven't heard anything special. But I guess it's just a question of days.
Yeah, and I was talking to Steven and some other people. They're suggesting that MDS is going to maybe emerge somewhere that is unexpected. They did have some things lined up, and he decided to take a step back to evaluate whether there might be some opportunities that are for him. That
right. Let's speculate for a second, Duane. There's one place in Major League Soccer that just lost their coach like last week.
There is, and he is becoming he is increasingly getting put onto lists of best non-MLS managers out there.
He's in the top 5 of Paul of a week and a half ago.
Well, people they're starting to notice if you're winning championships every time you move somewhere new, and you're doing it from scratch, then you start to think, well, maybe I should have a look at this guy. So MLS is a different challenge, I think, for MDS in terms of his ability. He's shown an ability to get more out of less. Can he get more out of more, if you know what I mean? That is his question in his coaching career, and he at this point has done enough to deserve that opportunity to prove whether he's able to manage the big egos, the big names, the big DPs. I think at this point he absolutely has earned that, and there's no denying it. You can't make an argument that he doesn't deserve a chance. And if you're an MLS team, why wouldn't you roll the dice on them? I mean, they're rolling the dice on players that have never coached before. Why the hell wouldn't you roll the dice on a manager that has won at every level below you?
Gattuso. You're talking about Gattuso in AC Milan? Because they fired their coach, and now they got Gattuso in Milan.
Yeah, at any rate.
Exactly. Right. No, you were talking about New England. Talk about Friedel.
Yeah, well, that's what I was talking about. But yes. All right, that's speaking of coaches, and this is the segue here. Greg Vanney, who was an inexperienced coach when he was named coach. He'd only managed at a lower level, at the academy level prior to coming to TFC. Named coach of the year today. And this wasn't surprising to me. It was a pretty dominant, too. He won by he had 34% of the ballots. And
first place, and then so on.
Martinez was like 21 or something. So it was a fairly significant win. And this didn't surprise me. And if you go back into our archives, you may hear me speculating back then that he would win Manager of the Year, and it would be more or less a reflection of the fact that TFC was going to get shuttered of all the other awards. And I think they will get shuttered of all the other awards because they already have, basically, unless Javinko wins MVP, which I don't think he will. They will. And I thought at that time that Vanney would probably get a lot of votes precisely because the voters would look at things and go, well, we're splitting the votes here against TFC, the best MLS regular season team of all time, on all these other things. We got to give him something, and why not manager, because he's the one keeping it all together. But that said, I think he deserves it based on what he did this year. I am someone who is always inclined to believe that the guys that coach the good teams tend to get overlooked for manager of the year or coach of the year in their leagues. For instance, the fact that Babcock has never won the NHL coach of the year is absurd, right?
Yeah. You're right.
But it has traditionally evolved into like the most improved teams coach gets coach of the year is how it works in most leagues. So
it's basically, can you prove, or is the perception out there that you influence the results of your team to higher than they were supposed to? Like, did you push this gang of players higher than they were supposed to?
Yeah, and that's how people view that award. So for it to go to the richest club is maybe going to make some people upset who believe very strongly in that philosophy. But I believe that we should recognize the ability to, because it's a skill to manage a lot of high-end talent too, and keep them focused on a singular goal, because there are a lot of clubs out there in the world, you talked about Milan a minute ago, that have a lot of talent that aren't necessarily firing on all cylinders. So let's not ignore that. I do think Vandy deserved this year. I think that there were other options out there that could have been interesting and could have been acceptable, but I thought Vandy was clearly the best choice, both for the reasons I mentioned and also, sort of that other thing I said, that as sort of a prize overall for everything, because they can't give every player, they can't put, 11 guys on the best 11 from TFC, right? So they have to recognize them in some way.
Yes, exactly. All right. You can follow Duane on Twitter, as always, at 24th Minute, and myself at Kev Laramee. Enough for today. We're back tomorrow in just like a few hours. You can listen to us live again on YouTube tomorrow and on demand anywhere you get your podcasts. Soccer Today SPN. And until next time, as always, have a great soccer.
You can find the podcast version of all the shows we do on iTunes, Apple Podcast, Google Play Store, TuneIn Radio, iHeartRadio, and anywhere you get your podcast.